Liars always leave traces, and knowing what to look for can protect any relationship, any conversation, and any decision in a way that most people never truly understand. When someone lies to your face, they may believe they can get away with it, but their body, their words, and their behavior constantly reveal the truth if you know which signs to recognize. The problem is, most people completely miss these signs because they never learned what real deception actually looks like in everyday life. This video explains 5 clear signs that appear every time someone lies to you. And no, it's not about the old myths that someone lies if they look to the left or touch their nose. These signs are real, recurring patterns found in liars all over the world. Whether a friend is making excuses, a partner is hiding something, or a colleague is trying to cover up mistakes, by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to detect dishonesty before it causes damage in your life. And because each of these signs builds on the previous one, you shouldn't skip anything. If you're short on time, it's better to watch the video at 1.5 or double speed rather than skip parts, because if you miss even one sign, you might overlook the very lie that matters most. So let's get straight to the 5 signs every liar shows. The first sign that someone is lying is when they give way too many details about something that's actually simple. Think about it. If someone asks you where you had lunch and you just say the name of the restaurant, completely normal. But if someone suddenly starts talking about the parking lot, the color of the waiter's shirt, the song playing in the background, and how many napkins were on the table, something's not right. Liars believe that adding lots of details makes their story more believable. In reality, the opposite happens. The truth is simple and doesn't need embellishment. Lies, however, require props and extra elements to seem convincing, at least in the liar's mind. Those who tell the truth only say the essentials and move on. Liars turn a short answer into an entire script because they want to convince you and themselves at the same time. This happens everywhere. At work, when a colleague explains why they missed a deadline and suddenly talks about car troubles, the neighbor's dog, and a traffic jam that lasted exactly 43 minutes. In relationships, when a friend cancels plans and doesn't just say they're sick, but describes every symptom, every medicine, and every time of day in detail. Or in daily life, when someone explains where they were last night and suddenly talks about what they wore or what ad was on TV. The reason lies in how our brain works. When we tell the truth, our brain simply recalls a memory. Done. When we lie, the brain has to invent the story. Out of fear of being caught, we overcompensate by adding too many details to sound believable. This sign is reliable because it's almost impossible to control. Even people who lie often fall into this pattern because the fear of not being believed makes them pile on more and more information. The subtler version shows up when someone gives unnecessary time references, mentions random people, or describes things unrelated to the actual point. Watch for this in daily life, when someone explains why they're late, where money went, or why they didn't do what they promised. The biggest mistake is believing that more details equal more honesty. That's exactly what liars rely on. To notice this discreetly, just listen. Don't interrupt. Let them talk. The longer they go on, the clearer it becomes. Of course, detail doesn't always mean lying. Some people simply like to talk or have a good memory. The difference is, true details are relevant and move the story forward. False details are random and feel like filler. If you recognize this sign early, you save yourself from many disappointments. And as soon as you notice someone overloading you with unnecessary information, you can watch for the other signs. And the full picture comes together. Here it gets even more interesting. The second sign is when someone suddenly talks less or becomes harder to reach right after telling you something. This sign stands out because it's not about what someone says, but what they do afterward. Imagine, someone tells you a story, gives an explanation, makes a promise, and suddenly they respond slower to messages, reply less often, or seem to disappear from the face of the earth. They are suddenly busy when you want to talk. They avoid crossing paths with you. And it feels strange, because if someone told the truth, why would they avoid you? The answer is simple. They fear you'll ask questions they can't answer, or that you'll notice gaps in their story, or that you'll mention something that makes their lie collapse. So they prefer to keep their distance. Not completely, that would be too obvious, but just enough to create space. It shows in their language when someone who used to be chatty suddenly gives only short answers. It shows in their body language when they suddenly have somewhere urgent to go after a conversation. It shows in their behavior when they no longer reach out themselves or constantly have an excuse for why they can't meet. Think of relationships where someone is cheating and suddenly has to work late every night. Think of friendships where someone borrows money and then barely writes anymore. Think of work situations where someone steals your idea and then avoids team meetings. The reason lies in the stress of maintaining a lie. Lies cost energy. Every time a liar sees you or talks to you, they have to remember what they said, keep the story consistent, and act normal. That's exhausting. So they reduce contact to ease the mental pressure. The truth doesn't need maintenance. Lies, on the other hand, must constantly be maintained. And distance makes it easier. This sign clearly differs from honest behavior. Honest people don't avoid anyone after telling the truth. On the contrary, they're usually more open and present because they have nothing to hide. What matters is the timing. If someone starts withdrawing within hours or days after an important conversation, that's a clear warning sign. This pattern perfectly complements the first sign. If someone gives you too many details and then disappears, you know something's wrong. Both signs together create a clear picture that's hard to miss. Watch their response times, their willingness to see you, and whether they seem nervous when you bring up the topic again. The most common mistake is to believe that the person is simply busy or has something else on their mind. Sometimes that's true, but if it happens right after a specific conversation, it's rarely a coincidence. Liars try to cover it up by acting extra friendly in messages or liking your posts, but they're still not really present. They can't fully hide it because actions speak louder than words, and no amount of emojis can replace real presence. If you notice this sign, don't chase after them. Just take it as it is. Their absence is already an answer. And if you find this helpful and want to learn how to better protect yourself from manipulation and dishonesty, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this. Now let's move on to sign number 3, and this is one of the strongest. When someone lies, they almost always shift responsibility away from themselves and point to someone else. This is the so-called blame game, and liars play it masterfully. And instead of owning their actions or decisions, they create an entire cast of people and circumstances who are supposedly at fault. The truth stands on its own. It doesn't need a scapegoat. Lies, on the other hand, always need someone or something to blame, because the liar doesn't want to be the villain in their own story. Observe how this shows up in daily life. Someone misses an important meeting and doesn't simply say they forgot, but blames the traffic, even though everyone else was on time. Someone breaks a promise and blames the phone for not reminding them, or the boss for giving too much work, or the family for needing them, everything except their own decision. Or someone gets caught lying and blames you for misunderstanding them, or claims someone else gave them the wrong information. This deflection happens automatically and immediately. Psychologically, this is a defense mechanism. When we lie, a gap forms between reality and what we say. This gap creates guilt and a feeling of exposure. To reduce that uncomfortable feeling, the brain unconsciously shifts responsibility outward onto other people or circumstances. That way, the lie is easier to live with because we can tell ourselves it wasn't really my fault. Even practiced liars fall into this pattern because the desire to protect the ego and avoid guilt is stronger than the ability to simply admit mistakes. This sign is hard to suppress completely since it almost automatically shows up whenever someone feels attacked or exposed. The intensity depends on how big the lie is. A small lie brings a small excuse like, "I was busy." A big lie, however, comes with multiple scapegoats, other people, bad timing, unlucky circumstances, all at once. Context also matters a lot. In low-pressure situations, the blame can be subtle, a casual remark about something that supposedly delayed them. In stressful or risky moments, however, it becomes aggressive and detailed. The liar paints themselves as the victim of bad luck or other people's mistakes. To spot this sign, listen for typical phrases like, "because they made me do it," "I had no choice," or "it wasn't my fault." Pay attention to stories where the liar is always the one things happen to, never the one making things happen. The difference from genuine nervousness or stress lies here. Nervous people may explain themselves, but they still take responsibility. Liars explain and then push responsibility away. For example, if someone is nervous before a job interview and says they're afraid of making a mistake, that's honest. But if someone claims they couldn't prepare because the computer crashed, that's deflection. To be sure it's really the blame game and not just bad luck, you have to watch for patterns. Does this person always have an excuse? Do they ever take responsibility? Are they always the victim in their stories? If you notice signs 1, 2, and 3 together, too many details, then distance, then blame shifting, that's no coincidence. That's deception in full form. Once you learn to see this pattern, you'll notice it everywhere. And this awareness changes how you perceive people and judge their words. Now, let's move to sign number 4. And this is perhaps the most revealing of all. When someone lies, their story changes over time. Sometimes it's just small details, sometimes whole sections that suddenly sound different, but the inconsistency is always there. This sign should not be underestimated because this pattern alone has saved many people from toxic relationships, bad business deals, and dangerous situations. The truth has no versions. It happened once, and it stays that way, no matter how many times it's told. Lies, however, must be remembered, and human memory is far from perfect, especially when it has to recall something that never really happened. If a liar tells their story today and again next week, things begin to shift. Details get added or removed, timelines change, people who were supposedly there disappear or suddenly appear out of nowhere. In daily life, this shows up clearly. Someone says they were home all day, but later mentions stopping by the store. Someone claims they never met a certain person, but later talks about a conversation with exactly that person. Or someone explains why they couldn't help you, and the reason shifts from sick to busy to car problems, depending on when you ask. How noticeable these contradictions are depends on how big the lie is. Small lies bring tiny detail changes, easy to overlook. Big lies create massive logic gaps that get bigger each time the story is told. The more conversations there are, the more visible this sign becomes, because the liar has to build on their own lies. Eventually, they can't remember what they said last time, and still trying to seem normal becomes nearly impossible. Verbal clues include phrases like, "Actually, I meant, I don't think I said it that way," or "you must have misunderstood me." Non-verbal clues include sudden pauses when they realize they've contradicted themselves, looking away while retelling, or irritation when you ask for clarification. Liars try to control this by keeping their stories as short as possible and refusing to go into detail, or by reacting defensively and accusing you of not trusting them or exaggerating. But they fail because the truth has no fear of questions, only lies do. If someone gets angry or nervous just because you ask for clarity, it's usually because clarity exposes the lie. To make this sign even clearer, ask open questions that make them retell parts of their story without you leading them. Let them speak freely and bring the topic up again casually later. Then compare the details. Don't accuse, don't interrogate, just listen and compare. Many people mistake this sign for normal forgetfulness, and that's a mistake. Everyone forgets small things sometimes, but forgetting whether you were home or at the supermarket is not a small thing. Forgetting what you had for lunch last Tuesday is normal. Forgetting why you couldn't meet up is suspicious. The decisive difference, honest forgetfulness, sounds uncertain, with sentences like, "I think it was," or "if I remember correctly." Dishonest contradictions, on the other hand, sound convinced, even if the facts keep changing. This sign fits perfectly with the previous 3. Someone tells too many details, withdraws, shifts the blame to others, and in the end, Not even their own story matches. That is the complete picture of deception. If you recognize this pattern, the most important advice is, don't believe their words. Watch their actions. Words can lie, actions cannot. Protect yourself by keeping records of conversations if something seems strange to you, not to use them against someone, but to verify what you are observing. Trust your instinct when stories keep changing, because your subconscious recognizes patterns that your conscious mind may still be trying to explain. Now we have arrived at the fifth and final sign, and it ties everything together. This sign appears when a person's emotions don't match what they say. Think of conversations where someone told you something sad, but smiled while saying it, or something exciting, but sounded completely indifferent, or something serious, and brushed it off with a laugh. This discrepancy between words and emotions is one of the most reliable signs of a lie, and it's practically impossible to fake convincingly. When we tell the truth, our emotions match our words. If something frustrates us, we sound frustrated. If we share good news, we seem happy. Face, voice, body, everything fits together because everything is real. But when we lie, this alignment breaks down. We may say the right words, but the feeling behind them is missing or wrong, because we are not really experiencing what we describe. We are acting. This shows up everywhere in daily life. Someone calls in sick at work but sounds cheerful and energetic on the phone. Someone apologizes to you but looks more annoyed than remorseful. Someone claims to be happy for your success, yet the voice is cold, the smile empty. Or someone talks about a tragic experience and sounds oddly indifferent, almost as if reading a script rather than sharing a memory. Why this sign is so inevitable has to do with how real emotions work. True feelings arise automatically in the brain and are unconsciously reflected in the face and voice. You can fake emotions or hide them, but doing both at the same time while telling a complex lie is almost impossible. Something always gives the liar away. This sign is most obvious when someone has just started telling the lie and is emotionally unprepared, or when they are in the middle of the conversation and the facade begins to crumble. Short-term lies often show in small, fleeting misreactions. Long-term lies, on the other hand, lead to emotional exhaustion. The person seems increasingly detached from their own story because they have told it so many times that they no longer feel anything about it. Different personalities show this in different ways. Good actors or experienced liars can adapt their emotions better, but even they make mistakes, especially under pressure or when surprised. Socially insecure people may sometimes seem emotionally off, even when telling the truth. The difference is consistency. Their insecurity stays the same, no matter what they talk about. For liars, the emotional mismatch appears only around the lie. To distinguish this from nervousness or stress, nervousness shows up as exaggerated emotion, not as mismatched emotion. A nervous person may overreact, but their feelings still match what they say. A liar, however, shows emotions that don't fit at all, like calmness when talking about something sad, or anger when being thanked. Advanced methods to spot this include watching for so-called micro-expressions, tiny flashes of emotion that last only a fraction of a second before being covered up. Pay special attention to the eyes, because while a smile can be controlled, the eyes reveal the truth. Another technique is to suddenly bring up emotional topics and see how spontaneous the reaction is. Real emotions appear immediately. Fake ones take a moment. Clear warning signs are laughing about serious topics, showing no emotion about intense experiences, or opposite reactions, like smiling while claiming to be sad. And now you see how all 5 signs together create a complete system. When someone lies, they give too many unnecessary details to sound believable. Then they begin to avoid you to escape questions. When confronted, they shift the blame to others. Over time, their story changes because they can't remember their made-up details. And while all this happens, their emotions never quite match their words because they are acting, not remembering. Each of these signs on its own could still be explained, but all 5 together, that is deception, clear and undeniable, Once you are aware of these 5 signs, it becomes almost impossible to lie to you because you are no longer just listening to the words but recognizing patterns, seeing contradictions, and noticing what people unconsciously reveal. The long-term benefits are huge. Better relationships because you know who you can trust, better decisions at work because you detect dishonesty in negotiations and partnerships, better mental health because you trust yourself when something feels off. You protect yourself from manipulation, fraud, and disappointment, and gain confidence in your own judgment. But this is not an invitation to paranoia. It's not about distrusting everyone, but about being aware and informed, making decisions based on reality, not on someone's well-played fiction. So, there you have them, the 5 signs that appear every time someone lies. Too many details, withdrawal after the story, shifting blame, changing story, and emotions that don't match the words. These are not theories, but real patterns based on how the human brain works under the pressure of lying, and no liar can avoid them all at once. But with this knowledge comes responsibility. Practice noticing these signs in daily life, in movies, on social media, in everyday conversations. The more you train, the more intuitive it becomes. But remember, several signs together count, not just one. Trust patterns, not coincidences. This knowledge is meant to protect you and help you build more honest, stronger relationships, not to sow distrust or create conflict. Because the truth is, if you now move on and pretend you learned nothing, you are consciously choosing to remain blind. After everything you now know, ignorance would not be innocence, but self-deception. Allowing yourself to be lied to, even though you recognize the signs, is not an act of kindness, it is self-harm. The truth now lies before you. What you do with it determines whether your relationships, your work, and your life improve, or remain trapped in the same patterns.